This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
Pretty fun way to kick off Week 16 last night with an exciting game with a lot of weird intricacies. And if that's a harbinger of what's to come across the rest of this week, I am pumped to dig in. Today, we're going to talk some player props for Week 16 by talking to Swaim of FanDuel Research and picking his brain on some props he likes for Saturday's games. Then we'll dig into the Sunday slate as well, yardage props, touchdown props, and a same-game parlay that Austin is eyeing at FanDuel Sportsbook. Welcome on into Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast. My name is JimSannes. I am a managing editor for FanDuel Research. Joined here, as mentioned, by Swaim. You can find him on X and Blue Sky at Swaim3. You can find his work over at FanDuel Research, where he is an editor for us. Austin, happy Week 16 to you. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jim, and this is the conundrum you'll find yourself in betting all of these random futures in the summer. Last night was actually a huge game for me because I had an exact outcome Chiefs-Chargers AFC West bet that I placed all the way back in Denver. That was a must-win. Otherwise, that second seed in the AFC would have been Denver's almost assuredly. So that ended up being a pivotal game for me. I was not optimistic at halftime, but It is what it is. So it's just kind of how funny you can get yourself in webs of games that actually matter to you a great deal.
It's very funny because I also was not optimistic at halftime, despite the fact that I had the Broncos money line. I was like, oh no, this free kick thing is just good vibes, and I can't handle good vibes right now. So I was like, they're up 8. I don't feel great about it. And of course, things spiraled from there. So I'm happy that your future is going well. That's good. I love to hear that, especially when it's a bet on Justin Herbert and our mutual favorite Patrick Mahomes as well. Right. So you can root for that as well. And pretty fun game for the Chiefs coming up on Saturday too. Interesting game, at least. We're talking about the Saturday games. Props Austin likes there. Then we'll dig into Sunday and lay out the other player props, touchdown bets, and more Austin is eyeing for this week. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. Up on the feed right now, you can find our best bets for NFL Week 16. Talked to Megan Payton last night about her thoughts on the Week 16 slate, her favorite bets over there. Also had Riley Thomas on Wednesday breaking down the first round of the college football playoff. So if you want to get some bets in before this weekend, make sure you check out that both on the Covering the Spread podcast feed and the YouTube page. And that's important to subscribe now because our schedule for the next 2 weeks will be obviously very wonky due to the holidays. On Monday, typically we do a Monday Night Football preview. We're not doing that this week. We're going to go live at noon Eastern instead on Monday, breaking down my thoughts on the 2 Christmas Day games. So tune in then on Monday, noon Eastern, live on the YouTube page, up on the Covering the Spread podcast feed after that. Then the same schedule for Thursday and Friday with player props and the best bet show on Thursdays and Fridays. So Monday, the weird one. Again, no Monday night preview. My heart yearns to talk about Spencer Rattler, but hey, we'll have to kick that can down the line for that. So Monday, noon Eastern, breaking down thoughts on the 2 Christmas Day games. Subscribe to the Covering the Spread podcast feed, but also our brand new YouTube page. The brand new playoff is here, and this year there are 12 teams, which means even more chances to win on FanDuel. The action starts tonight, and right now, new customers on FanDuel can get $150 in bonus bets. Just place any $5 bet. You'll get $150 in bonus bets if you win. You can use your bets on spreads, live bets, over-unders, and so much more. Plus, when you win, you'll get paid instantly. Make every moment more and download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook today. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas, an affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in DC. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/Shag Connecticut. Visit MD Gambling Help at Oregon, Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Now, Austin, we are getting into the point in the schedule where we have got repeat divisional rematches. We got the Ravens, the Steelers, Commanders, Eagles, both big ones this week with plenty others as well. When you look at those rematches in the first games, How much are you willing to draw from what we saw the first time around and trying to extrapolate that for the rematch in the second time?
Yeah, and I think this is a great question. It actually made me look, should I be factoring these things in? Because I am more so a live in the moment, matchup, game by game, who's available, who's getting
Yeah.
what work. That's kind of how I bet. So I took a look at the 21 divisional rematches, including last night, by the way, that we have in 2024. And you've heard myths about betting them sometimes, like you take the under, it's low scoring in divisional rematches, or it's the home side if the home side won the first game. Like there's some weird like little myths out there. The team who won the first game in rematches this year is 16-5 in the rematch. That kind of makes sense. They're probably the better team. Inconclusive 11-10 against the spread record for the team that covered in the first game. So it doesn't really seem to, at least in this small sample, affect that. Home teams are 14-7 straight up in the rematches, but road teams are 12-9 against the spread. So that's kind of an interesting split where maybe the road teams are better bet against the spread. The myth that squashed like a bug was the under thing, right? Like their low scoring divisional rematches. They're actually 12-9 to the over this year, are divisional rematches. And then the most interesting note to me that I want to apply to props, as well as maybe looking at game totals, I actually kind of thought this methodology last night as well. 16 of the 21 games, they flipped from the total outcome in the first game. So if the first game went under, the rematch went over, or vice versa. So 16 of 21 fit that. And I think the why I'd be willing to apply that one is because maybe the market's overreacting to what we saw in the first game, when in reality, even you can apply that to a player prop. Maybe a player got held in check in the first game, and there's still a great matchup for them now. Maybe there's been a couple key injuries. You don't always want to buy in exactly to what you saw.
Yeah, I think we kind of saw an example of the flip that you were talking about with the Cardinals and Seahawks a couple weeks ago. They played in week 12 and then again in week 14. Week 12, the super low scoring game, 16-6. And the total in that game, I think, was like at 48.5. For the rematch, the total was, I think, 44.5. And that game finished with 48 total points. So kind of like you said, an overreaction to that one game sample where, oh man, 16-6, we're expecting the shootout. You know, Kyler couldn't move the ball at all. Didn't do a ton in the second game either, frankly, but like the Seahawks offense did in that one with Zach Charbonnet going bananas in that one. So I think it is a situation where you can draw the way teams may play things. Like if they're shifting how much zone or man coverage they play, you can draw stuff from that, like their game plan. But like the actual results, I agree with you. That's where you want to shy away from putting too much weight on what you saw in a one game sample.
Right, and there's going to be a prop we're going to talk about later. Very notably, this player underperformed in a spot where a lot of the betting public saw. I like the over this week, and we'll talk about why.
All right, so let's dig into what you're seeing across Week 16, beginning with the two Saturday games. Texans and Chiefs, Steelers and Ravens are the two games on Saturday. Austin, across those two Saturday games, which props are you eyeing for this week?
Yeah, so I have one that stood out to me. Unfortunately, the Steelers killed my vibe a little bit. I loved George Pickens if he was good to go, but George, I guess, still not ready to play, so it'll be a pass in that one for me. But I'm looking at the first game, Texans Chiefs. We've seen weird line movement in the traditional market here, where the Chiefs were underdogs with Patrick Mahomes potentially sitting, now 3.5-point favorites with him certainly playing. It certainly starts to feel like right now, right? But Nico Collins is the guy that I'm looking at here in this showdown, because I love buying elite talents off of a down week. He scored twice last week, so maybe if you only play fantasy football, you didn't know that he had a down week, but he only had 17 yards receiving, and I mockingly said before the season in a fantasy preview, I was talking about how much I love Joe Mixon, who's had a great season anyway, by the way, but I was like, if Nico Collins was going to pay off his draft spot in fantasy football, he would have to just become one of the clear best wideouts in football. Well, he became one of the clear best wideouts in football. We'll just charge that one to the game, but the guy is one of the most productive yards per route run in the NFL, and I love this matchup for him. The Chiefs are somewhat of a run funnel, number 5 schedule adjusted metrics, 6th best rush defense. They're 14th only against the pass. They play a ton of man coverage. Nico, 3.15 yards per route run against man coverage this season. And the Chiefs have ceded at least 70 receiving yards to the opposing team's top target in 7 straight games. This is Nico freaking Collins. I love over 83.5 receiving yards for him here on FanDuel.
Now that number has inflated. Sounds like people are on the same side as you. 86.5 now the number for Nico Collins. 3 yards is significant, obviously, but also it's Nico Collins where he is getting yardage in chunks. Are you still okay with it up to 86.5, or is that number high enough where you start to hesitate?
No, I think it's certainly still fine because,
Okay.
like you said, he gets high variance downfield work. The Chiefs have actually been an explosive play. They leak a lot of those and have in recent weeks. You think back to the Black Friday game with Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers chewing them alive is what I think of mentally. So I like this spot for Nico. I think it's a little similar to when last time we talked about Justin Jefferson. High variance downfield targets. I'd be surprised if this came down into that range where this line is moved.
Yep, I think that does make a lot of sense. Okay, so Austin is on Nico Collins over 86.5 receiving yards. That is minus 113 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Let's talk now about the Sunday slate, Austin, beginning with some yardage props. When you look at the yardage props that are currently posted at FanDuel Sportsbook, where are you seeing value there?
Yeah, so I've had this spot circled since Monday. I still don't have a line, surprisingly enough, though. I'm looking at the Bears and Lions game, and I talked about a guy that very notably in the first game against the Lions came under this yard. He only had 39 rushing yards, DeAndre Swift did. But it can't really get much worse than this, and we know the situation has changed with the Lions, right? They've suffered key injuries, Aiden Hutchinson weeks ago, but now Liam McNeil off the defensive line as well. They've really struggled against running backs. They've actually plummeted to 24th in number 5 schedule adjusted rush rankings. They're ahead a lot, which helps mask that. But at home, divisional rematch. The first game actually went over the total, so if you want to apply the earlier trend, maybe this one's a little bit lower scoring. But I don't think it'll get worse for DeAndre Swift in this game, and it can't get worse than it was Monday. He still had 19 carries, produced 76 yards against the Minnesota's really great rush defense. Now Detroit coming in, not exactly the same sort of rush defense, and Thomas Brown seems to have committed to running the ball. DeAndre Swift has a 69.2% snap share in the last 5 weeks as well. He's not always the most efficient player, so I could see this going wrong, but when we project him at FanDuel Research for 69.6 rushing yards, I don't think 100 yards on the ground here is crazy when they really committed to Swift. He just excelled in a great matchup, and now all of a sudden he's got a chip on his shoulder. This is kind of a repeat, and I feel like I'll get a little bit of value, and the reason he's not up yet, as I assume, is still the hamstring injury that he's been fighting, but I love DeAndre Swift rushing yards in this game.
Yeah, it's that plus Roshan Johnson looks like he'll be back for this game. I'm assuming that's the other reason why. Although he was full in practice Wednesday, so I think we can assume that Roshan will be back for this one. That's probably part of why Prop Now posted the one prop that is up for Swift is his anytime touchdown prop plus 130 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Obviously, that needs the Bears need to score a touchdown. So I understand why the hesitance to go there. But checking out the rushing prop for Swift, where would that number need to be where you start to say, actually, I'm good. Maybe we'll just pass on this one?
So I'm closer to, like, when I've tried to project things myself. It's still in beta, but I'm closer to like 74.5 rushing yards. And I'd be very surprised if the line was that high because of his first game against the Bears falling so short. I'm anticipating this line will be about 60.5. That would be my guess.
So that's what we're looking at for Swift. I was giggling in part while you were talking because I pulled up the Jahmyr Gibbs props just out of curiosity. 128.5 rushing plus receiving yards is a number for him. He averaged 132 without Montgomery last year, but that is an absurd line. That's like a McCaffrey line, which makes sense. It makes sense, but I had to chuckle when I saw that one. So check out DeAndre Swift once he has posted at FanDuel Sportsbook for some potential rushing props there. Any other yardage props you like on Sunday, Austin?
Yeah, so I think I'll keep it in the same realm I did with Nico Collins. Why don't we just look at really good football players? So I'm looking at the Rams and Jets here. I'm looking at Puka Nacua, over 90.5 receiving yards. Puka has gone nuts in recent weeks. This is the place where me, of all people, I typically am looking to sell. But I just don't even know if this is a sell spot for Nacua because 37.1% target share in the last 5 weeks is best in the NFL by over 5 percentage points. It is a huge workload for him. They've really scaled back Cooper Kupp's work as well. He's getting at least 4.0 targets, at least 10 yards downfield. So the yardage upside for Puka, we saw him bust this with a 50-something yard reception after the rain cleared in Santa Clara last week. So again, one of these high variance guys, I feel like it won't necessarily come down to this range, and there might be a little bit of a discount. I still feel like people perceive the Jets as a really strong secondary, like a really strong matchup because their corners, like Sauce Gardner, are very good. But if you look at New York getting torched by Brian Thomas Jr. last week, I don't think it was a fluke. They're just 16th in number 5 schedule adjusted pass defense rankings. They're actually 7th worst on an EPA per target basis in just the past 5 weeks. So the more you narrow it down, it's getting worse and worse as we progress through the weeks. I don't think this is the place to sell. I think Puka is going to be around the century mark, especially when I believe the Jets will actually be pretty competitive in this game, meaning that they'll have to deploy Nacua. They can't just sit on a lead or anything like that. So I like Puka to encroach the century mark, and I don't think 89.5 is a bad number for him.
Yeah, 8.5, the number right now for Puka Nacua. That is sitting at -114 in the over. You alluded to this, but the Jets have struggled against top receivers this year, despite the fact that their corners are talented. For whatever reason, they just haven't been good. Part of that's because Gardner's been banged up, I think, for most of this year. He's been playing through it. He played last week in the BTJ game. He should play once again this week, but definitely not at full health. So I think that exploiting that with someone who the Rams just very clearly want to use aggressively in Puka Nacua, over 8.5, -114 does make sense. Okay, Austin, let's talk some touchdown bets. Where are you seeing value there for this week?
Yeah, and I thought I was going to have to swallow way more chalk with this guy, but I'm looking in the Dolphins game against the 49ers. Should be a fun one for offense, and I thought Devon Achane was probably going to come in closer to -150 to score. I was surprised by the line when he didn't score last week, and he has this godly red zone rule for the Dolphins in a game where they have a 23.5-point team total. 40.3% of the Dolphins' red zone opportunities in the last 5 weeks. That's 3.8 carries and 1.2 targets in that area of the field per game. Being at home to me is huge for him. This Dolphins offense just seems to be much better at home than they are away from their stadium. He's scored in all but one home game this season. The one game he didn't score was with Tua out of the lineup. So when Tua's been in the lineup, he's been at home. He's scored in every game this season. San Francisco is number 5's 8th worst schedule adjusted rush defense. They've allowed the second most scrimmage touchdowns to running backs as well with 16. So we have him at FanDuel Research projected for 0.69 touchdowns. That's even showing value on this spot against a -110 pick'em. So I like Achane to get back in the end zone this week.
Yeah, -110, as you mentioned, for Achane. I also think you could get a usage bump here with no Jalen Waddle because they kind of seem like they're willing to use everyone more. When that happens, I like Malik Washington as a player, but I don't expect him to suddenly become a focal point of this offense. So it'd be more so giving more work to Achane, more work to Tyreek Hill, more work to Jonnu Smith. And this Niners defense is healthier now with Nick Bosa, Dre Greenlaw being back, but it's still not a defense I'm fearing right now. So I do think that makes sense. So Austin is on Achane, -110 for the Niners and the Dolphins. Any other touchdown bets stood out to you?
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm glad you mentioned that because weirdly enough, in 4 home games this year, Achane didn't score a rushing touchdown. It was a receiving touchdown. So
they can't run the football, so it makes sense.
Exactly. So I'm glad you mentioned the bump in potential pass game work too.
Yep, exactly. Okay, any other touchdown bets stand out to you?
Okay, I'm sure I don't actually know how many people have given this out on your show this week. I know our colleague Skylar Carlin is in absolute shambles in how Trey McBride's season has gone, but I am calling it, guys. I think this is the week, and odds makers are with me. He's a little bit shorter for a touchdown this week than he has been in recent weeks. Last check was +125. Looks like he's +130. Line's already moving against poor Trey McBride, but history's moving against him too. Of course, he has 87 catches to start an NFL season without a touchdown. That is an NFL record. If you just remove the tight end label, it's kind of amazing that this has happened to Trey McBride because he's seen 12.8 targets per game in the last 5 weeks. That is the most in the entire NFL, period. Like, not factoring in wide receiver position, anything like that. Add in the fact this is a big-bodied dude designed to catch touchdowns. It's kind of unbelievable that he hasn't so far. But luckily, if it's not now, I think it'll be never because Carolina is a phenomenal matchup for tight ends. They've allowed the most end zone targets and receiving touchdowns to the positions. We have humbly requested in recent weeks. We thought it was going to turn around. I'm guaranteeing, if not demanding, it is the fantasy football playoffs. I think Trey McBride managers that have been patient get rewarded this weekend in a sublime matchup with Carolina. I know Kyler was joshing about the weather and it being cold outside in his press conference the other day, but I do think this will be a great matchup for him to target Trey McBride.
Well, funny you mentioned what Kyler is saying, because Kyler is also tweeting about Trey McBride not scoring. He said 85 will score soon. He literally tweeted that. So, they're aware of it. They've been funneling work to him inside the red zone recently. If you look at the full season in games McBride is active, he has a 37% red zone share. That is among the best marks in all of football. And he has not scored a receiving touchdown yet this year. That is bizarre, but Kyler knows. The offensive coaching staff knows. Trey McBride knows. The sportsbook knows, because as you mentioned, he's +130, which is a short number for a non-running back for anytime touchdown or a non-Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts. So everyone knows, but I get it. And like that stuff does matter. If Kyler's tweeting about this guy, like that stuff does matter. So I do think it makes sense to still keep considering him just because like eventually a regression will hit and it's just a lot of factors converging here.
Yeah, absolutely. Our guy Brandon Gadula, every summer he does 5 touchdown tight ends who should score more touchdowns in 2025. You can just pencil Trey McBride in as the cover guy on that article next year.
He can score twice per game for every remaining game this year and still be a regression candidate for next year. Like that's the way things, well, maybe not because of the rushing touchdown, but still it could probably be the case. Okay. So Austin is on Trey McBride plus 130 to finally get that first receiving touchdown for this year. Okay, Austin, let's talk about some same game parlays. What is your favorite SGP across the entirety of week 16?
Yeah, I'm going to shamelessly plug our site, FanDuel Research. I'm going to have a props article as well as best bets for Buccaneers Cowboys going up this weekend. So stay tuned for that Sunday Night Football Island coverage individually. But why don't we look at Buccaneers Cowboys for a same game parlay here as well, just to have some fun on the show. I got my CeeDee Lamb jersey on when in Rome. It's tough for me. Now I live in Lubbock, so I can wear local stuff, and it's not like an affront, but I'm a Raiders fan, so when I lived in Denver, it was really hard to wear both my own gear, and it was hard for me to wear Broncos gear. But CeeDee Lamb's a good player. Maybe he'll make an appearance here, but when I build this out, I'm looking at a high-scoring game. You see the total at 48.5. I want to get over a key number of 43, one of the most common scoring outcomes in NFL history, even more so the scoring has been a little bit suppressed this year compared to some recent years, but key number of 43. So I'm going over 42.5. It's minus 260 on an alternate total on FanDuel. I'll give you a minute because there's so many markets, which I love, but it can also take a while to find exactly what you're looking for. But that's the cost of doing business. So over 2 at 42.5 minus 260. I'm looking at Bucky Irving for an anytime touchdown. Another guy buying on an elite talent that didn't score last week. Team best 34.6% of the red zone opportunities in the last 5 weeks. I think the fall off of some of his opportunity in the red zone has been related to health. He's been banged up, so they've used Rashad White a little bit more, but now a little bit further from that groin injury. I think Bucky is practicing more, should have a better role, and they made it very clear when he's healthy, they want him to be the guy down around the goal line. So I love Bucky to score a touchdown. We know Dallas's rush defense struggles. They've been a bottom 3 rush defense all season at number 5, now missing DeMarvey and Overshown. So I like Bucky to score. It's minus 115 on FanDuel. And then I'm going to keep it really simple. I'm looking at both Mike Evans and CeeDee Lamb for at least 5 receptions apiece. Evans minus 270 for that. CeeDee is minus 440. So quite a bit of juice, but there's a reason why, because these are 2 of the top 12 target shares in the NFL over the last 5 weeks. They don't really have what I'd call elite competition for targets. And I love Jalen McMillan. I wouldn't put him in Chris Godwin's category quite yet. We've got them projected both for at least 5.6 catches at FanDuel Research. So this is ostensibly a hook of 4.5. I like that when to me, this is going to come down to the hook. I'll stay under it. And by the way, if you're driving, listen to this podcast, both of them at 5 receptions, nice and easy to remember. So I'm going with an alternate over, Bucky to score, and then both of the top receivers to catch at least 5 passes in this one.
That all over is 42.5. Again, Bucky anytime touchdown, which obviously correlates well with an over. And then CeeDee Lamb, Mike Evans, both have 5+ receptions. The thing I like about Lamb is that they're getting him a lot of short targets, which are very catchable. And like he's an amazing downfield receiver, but Cooper Rush is not an amazing downfield thrower. So I think that that's a good way to use him and get the ball in his hands. And that's also conducive to this prop. As for Evans, they are very aware that he is 85 yards per game away from his 1,000 yards receiving. Also, homecoming narrative for both Mike Evans and Baker Mayfield, who are Texas natives. So got a couple dumb, non-important narratives aligning here for this one as well. That is plus 289 for that 4-leg same game parlay. I think it's a really fun game. I'm excited that you're going to be writing up that game for the site later on, because I need the Bucks in that game pretty badly. As always, as it's been every single week this year, it feels like I've needed the Bucks, but I think it'll be a fun game. It should hopefully feature a good amount of points there as well.
I would estimate your model's performing pretty well, because it feels like the Buccaneers aren't getting a lot of respect yet in betting markets and things like that. They keep putting these big results out there, like a road win in Detroit, road win over the Chargers, that are very, very impressive. So maybe the Bucks can make some noise in the postseason.
It's 8-3 on the Bucks. It has been not as good on everyone else this year. So 8-3 on the Bucks, but hey, we'll take it. Let's hopefully run it to 9-3 on the Bucks on Sunday night. Alrighty, that is all that we have here for today and this week on Covering the Spread. Again, weird schedule for next week, so to make it easier, just make sure you subscribe to Covering the Spread, the podcast feed, and the brand new FanDuel Football Betting YouTube page to get these shows as they go live Monday, Thursday, and Friday for next week. Austin, enjoy all the football this weekend. Enjoy the college football. Enjoy the NFL. Happy holidays to you, and we'll talk to you again here soon.
You bet. Happy holidays to you, Jim. Hope you have a great day celebrating with your family on Wednesday.
Definitely will. You can find Austin on both Blue Sky and X at Swaim3. I am on X and Blue Sky at JimSannes. You can find FanDuel Research on X at FanDuel Research. Big thank you to our YouTube producer, Justin Lane, for his work on the video side of things. Thank you, Justin, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Enjoy the football this weekend. It should be a blast to watch this 12-team playoff get underway. Good NFL games as well. We'll talk to you once again Monday to get you ready for some Christmas Day football games. This has been Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast.